All right, I got mine now. All right. Well, all right. Everybody just missed the first part of this. I'll have to get in there and do some cutting and everything. We're in chapter 17, and we're reading. We're reading here. We started in verse 20, and we were reading along. It says here, and when he was demanded of the Pharisees when the kingdom of God should come, he answered them and said, the kingdom of God cometh not with observation, neither shall they say, Lo here, or Lo there. For behold, the kingdom of God is within you. And he said unto the disciples, the days will come when you shall desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you shall not see it. And they shall say to you, See here, or see there, go not after them, nor follow them. For as the lightning that lighteneth out of the one part under heaven shineth unto the other part of under heaven, so shall also the Son of Man be in his day. But first must he suffer many things, and be rejected of this generation. And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise also as it was in the days of Lot. They did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven, and destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he which is upon the housetop, and his stuff in the house, let him not come down to take it away. And he that is in the field, let him likewise not return back. Remember Lot's wife. Whosoever shall seek to save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall lose his life shall preserve it. Then he goes on about the two in the bed, two in the field, and all of those. So he says, remember Lot's wife. Now we read into that when we say that remembering Lot's wife means that we don't want to desire for the things in the past, and possibly that's a good explanation. But we're reading into the text. We're assuming that's what Lot's wife was thinking. And since I wasn't there and I didn't get to talk to Lot's wife, and I didn't get to talk to anybody, it's just conjecture on our part. So while we're playing with this what ifs, or what do you think she was thinking? Then let's think about this. They are coming out of Sodom, and they are scared out of their living wits, because fire and brimstone is falling. In fact, you can go there now and you can still pick up these little. They look like snowballs, little round, little balls, and they're white. They're just full of sulfur, and so we still have the evidence of all that right all around there. And so at any rate, Jesus is saying, remember Lot's wife. Why? I think possibly some of that, because he says he that is trying to save his life will lose it. That's the next thing he says. So what if in their fear she was trying to see how close it was getting to her, and she delayed in her action, and that delay cost her her life, and not only that, but caused her to turn into a pillar of salt, because there was a urgency upon Lot and his family. It was so urgent that the angels literally grabbed Lot by the hand and dragged him out of the city. The urgency was so great. I believe that there is going to be a time that there is going to be urgency upon this earth. In 2029, in April of 2029, about the time of Passover, depending on when the barley is Aviv, and when the moon is actually seen. But around the time of Passover, maybe on Passover, we have a meteor coming very close to the earth. Now, they tell us, oh, you don't have to worry about it. It's going to miss us by miles, but it's going to get close, but it's not going to actually hit us. Well, it doesn't have to change its trajectory much to actually hit us. When you start looking at all the other signs of the time that are in the air today, then it's quite interesting that could be what Revelation is calling wormwood. And when April of 2029 comes, we'll find out whether or not it actually is or not. Yeah. So here's the we got so many things coming together right now. And there is an urgency that I believe that God is wanting us to get involved in, to where we're not thinking about the destruction that is coming, the destruction that is happening, but we are urgent in our walk, and that we are urgent in doing what God tells us to do, because the angels had told them specifically, get out of the city. Run out of the city and don't turn back. Don't look back. All right, so how did they get into this mess? Let's go back to Genesis. Now, I'm not going to read all the chapters because there are several chapters in here. But starting in chapter 11 of Genesis is when this all starts coming to pass about this time of Lot. And I believe there is more to this story of Lot than we want to give credit to, because Lot is mentioned by Yeshua that it would be like in the days of Lot. So let's look at the events that came up in the life of Lot that might shed light on what we are experiencing and will experience in here today. I know that you probably have never heard an end times message on using the story of Lot, because we just look over at Lot and we go, well, he was kind of a dumb idiot. All right. So first of all, over in chapter 11, and we'll look at verse 27. It says, now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. Well, there we go. That's the first mention of Lot in the Bible. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of nativity in the Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren; she had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's sons, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son's Abram's wife. And they went forth with them from the Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came into Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So when Abram came out of the Ur of the Chaldees, now notice when God, if you read in chapter 12, it says, now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of the land, right? He didn't say, he said, and get away from your kindred and your family. But Abram doesn't do that. He takes his father, and he takes also his Lot. So that's how Lot gets into this whole picture, is actually a disobedience on Abram's part by not doing what God said. In chapter 12, verse 1, now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of the country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house. That's pretty specific. But Torah comes with him. Partial obedience will cause problems in the future. Partial obedience. Abram was obedient. He went. In fact, he's in the Hebrews chapter 12 in the statement of faith. He says that Abram left not knowing where he was going. By faith, he did that. And the promise was to Abraham that he would make him a great nation. Then the next thing that comes along, there's a famine, and Abram goes out of the land of Canaan where he was instructed to go, because he had not learned to trust God and trust God's direction. Just because things look like they are falling apart doesn't mean you have to leave. Abram left the land that God had sent him to, where he was going to make him a great nation, because there was a famine in the land. Now, we know that God would have taken care of Abraham because Abraham had a covenant with God. But Abram had not come to that realization, had not come to that faith in his walk, he had come to that confidence with God to where he would understand that, and so he went to Egypt. And well, that caused a lot of problems. Because then he lies about his wife Sarah. She ends up getting into the Pharaoh's harem, and God has to save the whole mess by giving Pharaoh a terrible dream and telling him, you better watch out, buddy. You're messing with the wrong person here. So then Abram comes back to the land. He builds an altar back up in Bethel again. He rebuilds that altar. And then they start to get a lot of flocks. And so Lot comes to Abram one day and he says, look, he said, we've gotten so much flocks. He said, the land is not going to, we can't live together in the same land. And so Abraham says, okay, then we'll separate. You make the choice of where you want to go, and I'll take whatever you don't take. And so Abraham sets aside and watches, and Lot looks over there at the Jordan Valley, and he looks down at the cities, the 5 cities that are down there, and he makes his choice. I'll take the fertile ground that looks like, and it's so interesting how the King James brings out, it looks like the Garden of Eden, and like the land of Israel, or land of Egypt. Wow. But Abraham knew something that Lot didn't know. And that was that they were not to settle in that land, because there was the time of the Canaanites was not yet fulfilled. And so there had to be a time period before Israel could actually dwell in the land. Up until that point, they were to be living in tents as sojourners through the land. So Lot says, I'll take that. Abraham says, fine, I'll take the rest. And so Lot then leaves. And it says that he pitched his tent toward Sodom. He wanted to get close enough to get the benefits of the city without being consumed by the city. And so he pitched his tent towards Sodom. Eventually he moves into Sodom, and he actually builds a home, a house, and he lives in a house. Then eventually, after that, he ends up being at the gate of the city as one of the judges of the city. Quite interesting way it progresses. Now this is so interesting, because once Lot is separated from Abraham, then God speaks to Abraham again. We don't hear God speaking to Abraham until Lot is separated. He spoke to him back in the Ur of the Chaldees to leave and leave his family and everything. But now that Lot is out of the picture, then God speaks to Abraham again. And so God tells him, this is over in verse 14 of chapter 13. And so then Abraham went and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, that's in verse 18, which is in Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. So Lot pitched his tent toward Sodom, and there's no record of Lot building an altar. But when Abraham pitches his tent in Hebron, the first thing he does is build an altar. Because this is all about relationship. You see, Lot came to Abraham and said, we cannot have a relationship in the same land. The land is not big enough for the both of us. But God comes along, and suddenly the land is big enough for Abraham and his God. It wasn't a question about the size of the land. It was the size. It was the relationship that was happening between Lot and Abram. And Lot could no longer live next to Abram because they had different ambitions in life. And so they separated. Then we have the battle. The battle. Wow. This is so interesting because this battle is with what is now called the country of Iran. Chedorlaomer was from Elam. This is the southern part of Iran. And here we are in today, and guess who we're fighting with? Elam again. Right down there at the Strait of Hormuz, we have a blockade, and the Iran, they say, well, we'll open it up. No, we're not going to open it up. Okay, we're going to open it up. No, we're not going to open it up. I just saw today that they said that they're closing the Strait of Hormuz again. And guess this interesting thing is guess what the war is all about? These 5 cities that are in this war with Chedorlaomer, do you know what made them so prosperous? Wasn't the agrarian, it wasn't the crops, it wasn't the sheep and the cattle, it was the bitumen, the coal, that comes from the petroleum that is in the ground, that would come up and bubble up out of the ground, and they would use that as pitch on their ships and on their cities between the rocks and things like that. And so they made the money on this black ooze stuff, but it was a mess because it stunk, it smelt bad. You had the sulfur aspect as well in that area, and so it just smelled like rotten eggs and tar. You can imagine, and it burns. But they made a lot of money off this stuff. Petroleum product. What is the root of all this problem that we're having there with Hormuz? Petroleum. It's the same thing. This is deja vu all over again. We are living in the days of Lot. And Jesus said that it would be like the days of Lot. Then he says, Remember Lot's wife. So we know the story about Lot being captured and taken away, and Abraham with 318 men went and rescued him and brought him back. And those are wonderful, wonderful things that are all in that story. And then Abraham meets Melchizedek. And Melchizedek, Abraham gives him tithes of everything he has. That's very interesting. And then chapter 16 says, Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, bore him no children, and she had a handmaid, an Egyptian. And so now we have the story of that situation. And then Abraham has this conversation with God, and he says, all I've got is this guy by the name of Eliezer in my hand. Is he going to be my heir? Is he the only one? Is he going to get the covenant of the land and get all that? And he says, no, it's not him. And then in chapter 18, the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. So this would have been around noon time. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself toward the ground, and said, My Lord, if I have now, and now notice in the Hebrew it is singular. My Lord. But they were 3. Well, that's what the rabbis say, but the other 2 are identified as angels, not deity. But he does recognize something, because what has happened now? Abraham has got this relationship with Yahweh, Yehovah. And as Jesus said, my sheep know my voice. Right? Abraham knew his voice. And when the men came to him, he recognized one of them as the one that had been talking to him all the way back from the Ur of the Chaldees. And he said, My Lord, if I now have found favor in your sight, pass not away, I pray you, from your servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort your hearts. After that ye shall pass on, for therefore you have come to your servant. And they said, do as thou hast said. So now watch what Abraham does. Abraham goes out. They bake the bread, right? Probably was unleavened bread, because it's the bread of haste. And then he tells us, he tells his wife, he says, you'll need three things of dough, which was much more than what they would ever need, all right? There's a lot of the dough. So he did more than what was, because he's going to send some with him, is what he's going to do. And then he goes and he has them fetch a calf. And he kills a calf, and he prepares this wonderful feast for them. Wow. And then of course, we have the thing where they ask about Sarah and where she is, and they said that she's going to have a child. She's going to have this child, and she laughs. Abraham laughs. So they called him Laughter. So we have that story in the middle of all this. And right after this, then, God says to the two men, or let's see, the two guys take off. Yeah, two of the men take off, and one of them stays. And this one that stays is later identified as Yehovah. And so he stays, and God talks with him, and Yehovah says to Abram, he said, first of all, he says to himself, he says, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm going to do? This is so interesting because the reason that the three men came down was not to give this promise to Abraham. The reason they came down was to destroy Sodom. So on the way of destroying Sodom, they give the promise to Abraham. In the end time, during these days of Lot is still alive. These are still the days of Lot. We're talking about the days of Lot. This is a side thing is happening here, but we're talking about the days of Lot, and it's obvious here because right after they tell him that he's going to have a son in 1 more year, they said, we're not going to hide from Abraham what we're going to do. And so Abraham gets this message from God. God tells him, I've heard the things of Sodom come up before my ears. God heard the voice of the stranger being hurt in that city. You see, if you were a citizen of Sodom, if you were part of their culture, you were welcome. They would have parties and you would be the life of the party. But if you were a stranger coming into the city, they would treat you horribly. In fact, we find out later that they literally came out after the two angels that came there to get Lot. And they came and wanted to know them sexually. And when Lot goes outside the door to plead with them, he says, my brothers. Lot had become one of them. He had become accepted in the town. But when he would not give in to their demands for homosexual acts and deliver the two men to them, they got angry. This is your left on steroids. These are your woke people on steroids. And just like the woke people of today, if you don't agree with them, they get angry at you. You ever notice that? How angry they get if you disagree with them? That's the spirit of Sodom. And it's not just in the United States. This is worldwide. It is unnatural anger. My wife and I have a friend that my wife had been friends with for 50 some years, I guess, something like that. And when we got married, well, we would go over and we would have card games and play cards with them and just have a good time and have a good fellowship with them. But when they saw that we were supporting President Trump back here in his first time that he was running, they got angry. My wife was on a post talking to somebody else, talking to them directly, answering them on the post, and somehow or another, they saw that, and they contacted my wife, and they said, Margie, just stop. We're going, we can't support who we want to support. We can't make our own decisions out here. We have to see it your way or no way. And they broke off the relationship and will not even speak to us. They saw us in the parking lot and literally turned their heads like this and walked away, angry. Just because we disagreed with them. It's the spirit that does that to people. Breaking a friendship of 50-some years over an election. That's the spirit of this of Sodom. If you agree with us, fine. If you want to work with us, we're great. But if you're a stranger, if you come in with something different than the way we think, then you're not good. This is what we're living in today. We're living in the days of Lot. Others, he said, don't do this. They come under me in my house. I want to keep, I'm protecting them. He said, I'll tell you what, I have 2 daughters. Now, you think for me, just stay with me here. These 2 daughters are betrothed, okay? They are promised to be married because later on Lot is going to go to his son-in-law's house. These are son-in-laws that have not consummated the marriage yet. Okay? So they have an agreement to get married, but there is a process here, and so they haven't got to the full wedding yet. So they're in a state of betrothal. These 2 girls are in the house. They know they've been promised to 2 other gentlemen. And now their father is going to break that promise. And he literally goes as far to say, I will let you have my 2 virgins' daughters, and you can do to them what you want to do with them. That is a dysfunctional family if I've ever seen one. But Lot had lived in Sodom for too long. And his mind had become like Sodom. And he saw nothing wrong with offering his daughters to that mob. Now they got mad at him because they weren't interested in the female, they were interested in the male. Then they got mad at Lot, and they were going to force themselves into the door and force themselves and probably kill Lot in the process. And then all of a sudden the angel reaches around the door, pulls Lot through the door, and locks the door. And then as soon as that happens, a great big light comes along outside, and the people are blinded by this light. But do they go home? No. They claw at the door. They are so agitated. The mob mentality has taken over. And now they are trying to find the door latch and everything, and they are they're scratching the door. So the angel tells Lot, he says, if there's anyone in this city, go get them, because we've got to leave. Lot goes out, tries and finds his 2 son-in-laws. And he says, we got to get out of the city. I don't know if you've ever tried to tell somebody about the Lord's coming or not, but they'll almost do the same thing as Lot's son-in-laws did. They thought he was joking. They thought it was funny. Really? Really? We're in this great big city. No destruction is going to come to this city. When you start talking about judgment on America, people laugh at you. Go, oh, yeah, right. We're the strongest army in the world. What in the world could come against us? The judgment's coming to America. The judgment's coming to a lot of different countries as well. It's coming. You might as well get prepared for it. It's coming. But he said they laughed. And I find that interesting because we have this constant thing of laughing that keeps on going through this whole story. This laughing. Sarah laughed. Abraham laughed. Now Lot's son-in-laws are laughing. It's no funny matter. And so then they take Lot and they take him out of the city with his 2 daughters and his wife. And just as they're leaving the city, the angel said, "Flee unto the mountain." And Lot says, "Oh, please, please, just let me go to Zoar." Isn't that a little small city? Because the mountains is where Abraham was. Mountains was where the God worshiper was. He didn't want anything to do with the God worshiper. He wanted to stay in Zoar. And so the angel said, "We will not destroy Zoar." Now it's interesting they destroy all the other ones, but they don't destroy Zoar because Lot is in the city. But they said, "We cannot do anything until you get there." And as they were entering Zoar, all hell broke loose. Suddenly, the earth started spewing all this bitumen and coal, and then it would come back down. And so it was fire below and fire above. And a blast the size of 300 Hiroshima bombs occurred. And the walls of the city, they did not break and crumble, they melted. The sand that was there, it turned to glass. Because when you heat sand, you get glass. People died almost instantaneously because the first thing that happened, they would breathe in this hot air. And it would literally burn their lungs to where they would just suffocate them. Nothing was left of the city. There are no archaeological finds where you can find the walls of Sodom. It was down to nothing. Today you can go to salt was another thing that would come was scattered all over the place. In fact, you can go to the Dead Sea now, and the salt content in the Dead Sea is such that when you in minerals that you can lay in there and never sink. Not realizing that you're probably literally laying over a civilization that was destroyed. And a graveyard at the bottom of the Dead Sea. Somewhere near that area is a pillar of salt. That looks and resembles a person. Remember Lot's wife. Why do we remember Lot's wife? Because we need to revisit the life of Lot. It's a remez, it's a hint that there's more to this story about Lot's wife than what meets the eye, and that we are in the days of Lot. We are in the end times. We're in the times when things are going to go really rough for a while. Then what happens to Lot? Well, he stays in the Zoar for a little while, but then he decides that he will go to the mountains. And he goes and lives in a cave. And Lot convinces his daughters that there's no hope for them. They were, now think, they were espoused. They were agreed to be, they were promised to these two men that now have been destroyed in Sodom. So it's easy to convince them that no other man is going to want them. And so Lot goes to sleep, gets drunk, he goes to sleep, his daughter's getting drunk. The text tells us, and they have incest with their father. A twisted version of the Levirate law. That's what they're thinking in their minds. But I think that Lot was culpable in this. He lost his wife as a pillar of salt. And it caused him to do something, because he never got out of Sodom. Sodom never got out of him. And so the first one had a child, and she called him Moab. Moab is two words in Hebrew. It's the mem, which means from, and then av, which is father. From the father. From my father. Moab. From the father. The other daughter, she has a son, and she calls him Ami. Am is the Hebrew word for people. And the E part of the last word is the possessive form, my people. And so we have Moab and Ammon, the Moabites and the Ammonites, out of this incestuous relationship between Lot and his two daughters. Years and years and years later, a young lady by the name of Ruth through a beautiful story of how she left Moab and came to live with her mother-in-law, Naomi, and how she took care of Naomi and ended up marrying Boaz. And Boaz had Obed. Obed had Jesse. And Jesse had David, who became king of Israel. So out of the mess of this story of Lot, we get our Savior, who is a descendant from King David. We get an entire Jewish nation. We get this wonderful redemption story. of this, the mistakes that God had just turned around and made it into His own glory. Maybe you've made some mistakes in your life. As I'm looking at over here on the whichever camera, there it is, find the camera. Maybe the mistakes that you have made in your life has created an avalanche of mistakes and caused destruction all around you. But God's not finished with you, nor was He finished with Lot. And He will come out of this. You will come out of it. And God is going to turn things around and make something glorious out of all the mess. You cannot imagine. When I read about the book of Revelation, and I read Daniel, and I see all of the things that are prophesied to come upon this earth, and I think about all of the judgments of that are on the bowls and the trumpets and all those things that are going to take place, I think how terrible and how awful. But God is going to turn it all around and make it turn into good. Because one day, the one that is really behind it all, the one that has really messed this all up more than anything else, will be thrown into the bottomless pit to never be brought out. He will be thrown into the lake of fire. He will be completely destroyed. That's the one that's behind all this. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. And I think this is so important that we understand this in this last day, is that people are being demonically influenced. In some cases, demonically possessed. But at the very least, demonically influenced. And so you have to separate the person from the action. And while you have to be aware and be cautious around them, you don't have to get into the place where you fear them. God is not giving you the spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And if during these times we do like Abraham, we are agreeable and let the lots make their own choices. Even when it seems like their choices are benefiting them more than it benefits us. We're living in the days of Lot, where there's going to be a big separation. Because they cannot have relationships with you. Because you're God-fearing. And when they cannot have relationships with you, that's their choice. And let them separate you from you. Notice that Abraham didn't bring it up to Lot that they need to separate. It was Lot that asked Abraham and told him they need to separate. Abraham just simply allowed them to do what they was going to do. So sometimes we have to let people do, even if it means that we see that it's not right for them. Abraham knew the sin of Sodom, and he knew to stay far away from Sodom. In fact, when he did the battle, what did he do? He rejected the king of Sodom. I will not take anything from you, not even a shoe latchet, because I don't want you to say that you have made me rich. He's kept himself away from Sodom because he knew that was bad news, and if he got too close to Sodom, he was going to be in trouble. And Lot made his choice, and Abraham stepped back and allowed him to make that choice. Sometimes we have to let people make the choices, even though we see that it's going to be bad for them. Could have been even worse. He could have been destroyed along with Sodom, but he wasn't. So we are in the days of Lot. We're in the days just prior to a destruction that is going to come. And you can try to tell people, but I'll just let you know they'll laugh at you. But you can't let that bother you. You have to be ready to escape the destruction. Now, it's possible that we may go through some of the tribulation. It may be also possible we don't have to go through any of it. I do know that at some point we will escape somewhere. At some point. We can argue whether it's pre, post, or whatever, pre, mid, whatever. We can argue about it if we want. It's all going to pan out in the end anyway. But we need to be ready. Ready to leave the destruction behind. And don't turn around to go see if you were right. And don't get fearful. And be afraid that you're going to be destroyed. Because as long as you don't turn around, as long as you don't get scared and turn around. Because what do you do when you get scared? Oh, is it close enough yet? No. Keep your head ahead. Keep your eyes upon the goal. Yeshua is coming. Possibly the preachers have been right all along that she had a longing for her home and for her possessions. Possibly. But it's just as easily that she was just scared out of her wits. Don't let fear, because some fearful things are going to come on this earth. Don't let fear get into your heart. Fear is negative faith. It's having more faith in the things that are happening than you do in the God that is delivering you out of that. So let's all stand. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Yiveleka Yahweh v'yish milereka, Ya'er Yahweh panav eleka v'kaneka, panav eleka v'yasem leka shalom. The Lord will bless you and He will keep you. The Lord will make His face to shine upon you and He'll be gracious to you. The Lord will lift His countenance upon you and He will give you peace. Amen.